to the Xorosoft ERP and Zoro 1 training. This is training session 4. We're going to be covering the accounting modules in this training. So we're going to go over things like paying bills, paying invoices, your chart of accounts, bank recs, bank deposits, sales tax, and so on. So let's jump right in. Let's see, I've got my screen shared here. Perfect. Okay, good. So let's start with the item receipt center. So if you recall from the purchasing training, when you close an ASN, it's going to generate an item receipt automatically. Now, an item receipt is basically a goods receipt. The transaction here basically is it's going to debit your asset account and credit your AP. So it's basically a goods receipt that'll sit in this item receipt center. And what you have the ability to do is you can actually merge item receipts. So you can simply select multiple item receipts from the same vendor and then merge them. You'll want to be doing this if the vendor is sending you a bill that has basically all the shipments combined into one bill. So then you can basically combine all the item receipts and then convert it to a bill. Now, if that's not the case, you can simply just skip the step of merging. What we're going to do is I'm going to open up an item receipt, and I'm actually going to show you how to convert to a bill, and then we'll pay it. So basically what you want to do is match this item receipt up to your bill. If everything looks good, let's convert it to a bill. Now, the only difference between an item receipt and a bill is a bill you can actually make a payment towards, whereas an item receipt you can't. So I'm going to click on Options on the top right, and I'm going to go Convert to Bill. I'll click OK. And it's going to take me to the bill module with those lines automatically fetched in. I'm going to click on Save. And there we go. I've got my bill now. So now I can actually make a payment toward the bill. So there's several different ways you can record a payment against a bill. So for example, if I'm at the bill center, I can right-click on a bill, mark it as paid. All right, and there are different statuses for a bill. There's open, partially paid, and paid. Pretty self-explanatory. Let's go directly from the bill module, and let's pay the bill. All right, so I think I've got a default here that's not set. That's why it's showing me this message. So what the pay bill module does is, in this case, because I've done it from a bill, it's automatically going to select that bill for me. And all I have to do is simply select my payment date here, put in any reference numbers, and then choose my payment method. So for instance, let's choose this as maybe e-transfer. And I'm going to make sure I have the account selected here. There we go, and the pay amount here. So you can see the amount due and the pay amounts. Now, there's a couple things you can do here. You can apply a discount as well. So based on the terms of the bill and the due date, if you're eligible for a discount, you can actually go Options, Apply Batch Discount. So let's see if we're eligible for a discount. I'm going to actually choose maybe like a COGS account here. Apply batch discount. So actually there's no discounts on this bill. Now you can manually add a discount as well, so you can override any of that. Click on this 0 and you can actually expense this this amount as well. So you can basically put in an amount here, choose a discount account. So for example, let's say we were to do that. Even though the payment terms are COD here, I just want to show you just so you can see how it'll look like. And maybe let's choose the same COGS account. There we go. So it's actually going to warn me that the payment terms are not eligible for a discount. Are you sure you still want to apply a discount? We'll click OK. So yes, so you can see the pay amount has gone down now. So this is the amount that's actually going to get credited from the bank. And this $5 just goes towards a discount toward the bill. Now if we click on credit, here's where we can actually apply those already created prepayments and vendor credits. So if you recall, we created those in the purchasing training, vendor prepayments and vendor credits. So now is the time where we have our bill and we can actually apply them toward our bill. So I actually just clicked on that number underneath the credit and it gave me this window. So now, for example, I can say, okay, well, let's apply maybe 50 of this vendor credit. and let's apply maybe 20 of this prepayment. So $70 in total, and let's click on apply. And there we go. We've got $70 worth of prepayments and credit applied. And again, that's going to reduce the amount that's going to get credited from our bank here. So now if everything looks good, I'm going to click on Pay Selected Bills. Okay. And there we go. Our bill has been paid successfully. Now, if I notice on the bill module here, notice how the status of the bill has gone to paid on the top left here. That's because we've paid off this bill. And if I want to see the payment that we just created, I can go Options, Show Payments. So if I double click this, you can see our payment that we made. So we can see the transactions, for instance, right? So you'll see all the transactions. There'll be an exchange rate gain loss automatically recorded. If the exchange rate is a little bit different than if the bill payments exchange rate is different than the bill's exchange rate. So that's what will happen in this case, where it'll automatically get taken care of. I can void this bill payment too, in case I want to start over or want to redo something. And also one thing of note is you can pay off multiple bills at once. So we actually paid this bill payment, we only paid one bill, but you can pay multiple bills at once within one bill payment. So just something to keep in mind when you're actually recording bills. Okay, so let's go to the Invoice Center. We're going to talk about recording payments against customer invoices. So that was the purchasing side of things. And also, actually, before we go to invoices, I'll quickly mention how you can write up a simple bill. So for example, if you're doing things like monthly bills, things like that, it's really straightforward. You can just go to the bill module, select your fields here, select your vendor, where you're going to record the bill from, and then just choose the expense tab at the bottom here. And here you can add expense lines. So for example, let's say I want to add maybe this expense. You can select the tax too, click on add. There we go. We have our total, and then we click save, and we've got our simple bill. So in this case, it's just going to debit the expense line and credit the AP. That's what the transaction will look like in this case. So this is the case where if you just want to create a bill, a non-inventory bill, and you want to expense some accounts with it. All right, so let's go over to the customer side of things, to the Invoice Center. Let's talk a little bit about recording payments there. So here it's a little bit different. If you're recording deposits with sales orders, basically we can enable a setting that'll auto-apply those deposits when the invoice has been generated. So for instance, if you're recording deposits that are worth 100% of the order, you're going to get invoices which are automatically generated as paid. Just because since it's 100%, there won't be any amount left to collect. Whereas, if you're recording deposits at 50%, 25%, or no deposits at all, then you'll get invoices that are being generated with a status of open or partially paid. So these these invoices you'll want to collect on. So there's a couple ways you can do this. So the easiest way I find is just from the Invoice Center. You can right-click on an invoice, and you can go Pay Invoice. So again, this is the option where you directly want to collect payment toward this invoice. So this setup is really similar to what we just saw with the bill payment. Basically, you select your payment method here, your account. It's going to pre-populate the payment amount here for you with the original amount that was due. You can basically add a discount as well. You can edit the discount as well. So I can click on this discount amount, add a discount just like I did with the bill. And again, you have the ability to batch discount as well. So if you give your customers discounts based on payment terms and due date, if they're eligible for a discount, in this case they're not, because the terms and the discount date is actually not populated either. But if they were, you can add that discount here as well in batch. And then basically just fill in the rest of the information out and click on Pay Selected Invoices. Pretty straightforward. You can see here the invoice payment has been generated. So what I can do basically is I can right click on the invoice and I can click on show payments to show the payment that we just created. So for example, in this case, I'm going to open up this invoice payment. And again, just like bill payments, you have the ability to pay off multiple invoices at once. We only paid off one invoice, but you have the ability to pay off multiple invoices. You can void the invoice payment as well in case you want to redo things. So for example, if I wanted to void it, just like the bill payment, I can do that. I can right click again and pay this invoice. And I can choose to pay off other invoices as well. So I can do something like this. And I can basically add the amounts as well too. So let's say I want to do, maybe 200. Let's say the customer came in and said, okay, I want to pay $200 towards all my invoices that I owe. So you can say, okay, well, they want to pay 200. Let's put 79 towards this and the remaining amount toward this. So you can see that's 129 and 79, and you can see the pay amount that gets added here at the top. And now I can simply click Pay Selected Invoices. And there we go. Both the invoices have now been marked as paid. So if I pull up the invoice payment, we're going to see how it looks like there. There we go. You can see here the two invoices that were paid. So that's how you can collect payments at the invoice stage. Now you also have the ability to send them invoice payment links. So just like how we mentioned in the sales training, that you can actually send your customers a deposit link, which will allow them to actually process the payment with their own credit card using a link that's been sent to them. You have the ability to do that same thing basically here. You can send them a payment link, which will send them an email, and it'll allow them to enter their credit card information and process the payment. Of course, this is assuming if you have a payment gateway connected like Stripe or Moneris to your Xoro system. And that'll essentially do two things. When they process the payment, it'll appear, the invoice will appear as paid here or partially paid, depending on how much they pay. And it'll also record the payment here automatically. So it'll record the payment here automatically, and it'll also send the funds to your bank account as a payout. So that's an important thing to keep in mind, that you do have that option available to you. It's just like sending a deposit link at the sales order stage. You can now send a payment link at the invoice stage, and that'll actually mark the invoices as paid. All right, so that's one thing of note. And of course, you can control what these emails look like from the email template. So if you want to take a peek at what the link emails look like, you can, for example, you can see the deposit link, the invoice payment link. It's going to look something like this by default. And of course, you can tweak that as well. All right, so let me right click on this invoice. You can click on Apply Deposits Credits. So this is another way that you can apply excuse me, deposits and credits toward an invoice. So before, what we talked about was recording a payment against an invoice, but let's say there's already a credit or deposit on the customer's account, and they want to now apply that credit or deposit to an invoice. This is how we can do that. So let me go to an invoice that, here we go. So let's do this one. And so what I can do here, for example, I can see that, okay, on this invoice, I've got a balance due of about 1,000. I can say, okay, well, let me do maybe 400 of this deposit we want to apply, and maybe want to apply 300 of this credit. So if I scroll down, you'll see that I'm about to apply in total $700. Change the date here that I want the transaction to be recorded as. And then you can see the balance due after the credits and deposits have been applied. So I can simply click on Apply Selected, click OK, and there we go. They've now been applied to the invoice. Now the invoice will have the status of partially paid. If I click on the Previously Applied tab, this is a way that you can unapply those deposits and credits from invoices. So for example, for this customer, I can see all the deposits and credits that have been applied in the past. and I can simply click on any one of them right here if I want to unapply it. So this is pretty straightforward. You may need to use this in case you want to edit an invoice or something like that. At some point, you may want to unapply deposits or credits. So this is basically how you would do that. All right. Let's talk a little bit about your chart of accounts. So we mentioned in the earlier trainings how you want to make sure your account type and currency are correct for your chart of accounts. If you need to add additional chart of accounts, it's pretty simple. You can just use the account module, fill in the information here on the form, click on save, and the account will appear as an account on the chart of accounts. So pretty straightforward, and we've covered this as well in training 1. Let's talk a little bit about accounting periods. So you want to make sure that your accounting periods are set up in advance, especially when you have a new fiscal year upcoming. You want to make sure that that next fiscal year has been created, that new accounting period has been created in this module. If it hasn't, simply go to this module, click on Create New Year, and set up the next year. So reason why that's important is because if you were to try to create a transaction for that new fiscal year and the fiscal year hasn't been set up, the system's not going to let you create any transaction. In fact, across the board, the system's not going to let you record any transaction until the fiscal year has been created for it. So you want to make sure this has been set up. So obviously the most common times are, around New Year's or when your fiscal year is ending. So if you have fiscal year set up in the system, the one thing you can do from this module, which is quite handy, is you can lock months. So for example, I've got January 2019 locked here. And what that means is I've just got it frozen. So nobody can create, update, or void transactions that are posted within the month of January. So this is handy for your month ends and things like that. To lock and unlock, it's very straightforward. You can just do this, right? And unlocking is easy too. Simple as that. So this can be very handy, and it's important to note that this is not the year end that you're doing. It's simply how you're locking the months. And of course, you'll need to have a sub period of months for your fiscal year in order to lock the months. If you have a sub period of quarters, you would be locking quarters. So depending on your sub period, that's how you can control what you wanna lock. All right, let's head on over to the journal entry module. Let's post an entry and see what that looks like. So the journal entry module is pretty straightforward, pretty standard stuff. Here you can basically post an entry to your GL directly. So for instance, let's say I wanted to credit my bank account. Here we go. Let's say I wanted to credit it $125 and I wanted to debit an expense account. There we go. And you can see it keeps a track of whether the transaction's bounced or not. And I can simply add more lines to my transaction by just with this add button and having these accounts selected correctly. And as I add them, they get added to the bottom here. So let's click save. And of course, there's the standard fields available in the header, the reference number, memo, and so on. If you click on show transactions, let me show you what this transaction looks like. Exactly like the lines in the detail view. And then you can also mark this entry as an adjusting entry. You can create a reversing entry too. So what that'll do is create a reversing entry along with this entry. And of course, you have some options available here. You can show transactions. You can void this transaction. Voiding is a function that that is available basically in a lot of the modules from this options menu. You can create a duplicate as well, which is quite handy. So if you have an entry that maybe an adjusting entry that you do every quarter or every month, and it's pretty much the same entry, you can always open that entry up, duplicate it, create it for the next month. All right, so let's go to the Journal Entry Center. And you'll see our entry that we've created. Here we go. So you can see the entry that we've created. This is the Journal Entry Center. It's a very, very standard center, just like the other centers in the system. So it's got the same feature set. You can toggle columns, export this data. You can use advanced search to filter out the entries that you're looking for, and so on. All right, let's move on to the account register. And a lot of these modules that we're covering, most of them you can find in the accounting module, submodule right here on the left, including, the bank rec, the journal entry that we just mentioned, and a lot of the other modules. So the account register is basically like your GL. So what you can do at this module is you can simply, let's say you want to select an account. You can select an account and pull in all the transactions for that account. So I can sort it by date to have the oldest at the top or the newest at the top. And then I can toggle the columns that I want. So for example, I don't want this, but maybe I want exchange rate. And I've got a running balance on the right here, so on. So here I can actually pull in all the entries for this account. So this is a great way to see your GL in full. I can also, right now I've got, only a particular account selected, but I can select all accounts across the board. And then I can basically perform reporting by exporting this data into Excel or CSV, and then doing pivot tables and things like that as well. All right. So, and of course, you can filter as well if you needed to for your account register. All right. I'm going to quickly hop on over to another instance to see. Let's handle bank recs in that instance. So let's talk about reconciling your bank accounts and credit card accounts. So there's essentially two ways to, I'll kind of go through how you perform reconciliation first. So the way it works in Xoro is you're going to upload your bank statement into Xoro. And so that statement that you have in Xoro represents all the transactions from your bank or credit card. Now, against that statement, you're going to reconcile all the transactions that are in Xoro, all your bill payments, your credit card transactions, any entries, things like that. So you're going to reconcile those Xoro transactions against the statement. Now it's a matter of how do you get your statement into Xoro. So there's one of two ways get your statement into Xoro. You can perform a CSV upload, and we can actually set up a utility for you to automate this procedure. So most banks have some sort of online portal where you can download a statement in CSV format, and we can get those debits and credits into the system that way, the statements into the system. Be sure to contact your account manager regarding either option. And the second option is basically we can set up a direct bank feed. So using the Connect Bank module, we actually have an online portal where you can enter your secured credentials in, and it'll automatically connect to the bank account and fetch in those transactions automatically. So, and again, be sure to contact your account manager if you would like that set up. Typically, it kind of depends how you want to do things. Obviously, the CSV upload is more manual. The more automated way would be the Connect Bank option. So we would always recommend going with that option if your bank supports it. If not, the CSV method is always there. Now, once you have your statement in the bank, you can actually continue with the reconciliation. Now, when you actually start your reconciliation, like when you're getting onboarded and you're bringing your books over, that procedure is going to be a little bit different because you'll have to upload your opening balance as a CSV and reconcile your journal entry opening balance against that CSV. And then from then on, you can continue with your regular reconciliation. So be sure to contact your account manager or any, like your accounting team. They'll be able to help you out with that procedure, getting things started. But once things are started and you're onboarded, you have that opening balance in, and you brought your books over, then reconciliation becomes pretty straightforward. So I've got a reconciliation going on here with a bank account. So I'm going to click on Resume Reconciling. All right. So the way it works is on the left-hand side is my statement, my bank statement. So for example, I've got a deposit, I've got a couple payments, and what it's doing is it's finding a match to the Xoro transactions which are on the right. So for instance, this deposit for 592.16, it found two deposits in Xoro for the same amount. That's why it's saying two similar transactions found. So I can click on this, and then I can click on the transaction which is the actual one that I should reconcile to. So let's say it's this one, and then I can click on Reconcile. And I'm going to continue on with my next one. So I can click on this, again, select the one that it actually is. And notice here how you can select multiple entries. So you can actually reconcile multiple Xoro transactions to one single line of the statement. So that is possible. You always have that ability to do that. Let's actually go through with this one, and let's do this one as well. So far we've been finding transactions that actually have multiple Xoro entries. Now it's finding multiple because they're the same type. In this case, it's a deposit, so there's two deposits, and they're both for the same amount. That's why it's found two. So it's letting you decide which one it should actually reconcile to. Now in this case, it only found one match, so I can just tick this quite easily enough. And in this case, it actually didn't find any match. So I can click on options on the right here, and I have a bunch of options here where I can create an entry on the go. And then what that'll do is that'll create the entry and reconcile it all in one go. So if I click on options, journal entry, and then from here, for instance, I can simply select my credit account. So let's actually do that. Let's, I'm going to select my account here. Let's see. Let's do this one maybe. And click on add. I'm going to click on reconcile. And there we go. It created the entry and reconciled it all in one go. And again, there's these two remaining entries. So eventually what will happen is, as you go through your monthly reconciliation, your cleared balance will match your statement ending balance, and you'll have a difference of 0, where you'll be able to finish your reconciliation. And that'll be basically, if you're doing a monthly reconciliation, you'll be able to finish it. And then you'll be able to basically perform the next month's reconciliation. So depending on how often you do your reconciliation, whether it's weekly or monthly, either way, it'll work within Xoro. You can just set that information up. So when you, for example, when you're first reconciling a bank account, I can select one here. Right, so you can actually enter in an ending balance and an ending date here. Right, so this is where you can define what those balances are and the ending dates for them. So this is really handy, and it's important to note that also when you complete a reconciliation, so when you actually finish a reconciliation, it will generate a reconciliation report. So in this case, for example, I'm going to go to the Bank Reconciliation Center. I'm going to select my bank account here, and I'm going to pull all the reports for this bank account. So you can see here that I've completed a couple reconciliations. I can double click on them to show me the report. And the report will basically tell me what transactions were reconciled within that reconciliation, what was left, the statement ending balance, and then it'll also generate a change report if applicable. The change report will basically show me if there were any changes made to those reconciled transactions within that reconciliation. So if somebody went in and made changes to already reconciled transactions, whether it's unreconciling them or changing them afterwards, all those changes will be logged here in a change report. All right. And you can do the same thing for your credit cards as well, your credit card accounts. So again, you can get your statement into Xoro, your credit card statement, and then reconcile against that credit card statement all those different Xoro transactions. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about bank rules. So I'll just briefly talk about bank rules and how you can set them up. Um, what you can actually do is you can set up bank rules in the system that'll automatically capture uh, the lines within a statement. So you can use capturing criteria like, if a payee contains something or if a description contains something. A lot of the times the statements are uploaded with quite a bit of data. So if there's some complete data there, you can capture um, those statement lines with these search criteria, and then you can simply say, okay, well, once that line has been captured, let's say you want to create a rule for parking fees. You can always say description contains parking, and then you always want to expense it to this account, and you want to expense 100% of it. Right? So you can add something like that, set up a rule, and what that rule will do is when it sees that statement during reconciliation, it'll actually offer to create a transaction for you and reconcile it all in one go. So this is handy if your transactions are not already created in Xoro and you need to create them on the go. You can actually use rules to speed things up a bit. That way you're not creating transactions manually all the time, especially if they're smaller transactions. Creating rules for them can be quite handy. Okay, so that's bank reconciliation. I'm going to log out of this module, this instance rather, and let's go back to our original instance here. Okay, let's go to the outgoing payment module. Okay, so the outgoing payment module is handy for cutting checks straight from the system, especially if you want to skip your AP entirely. This module is pretty good for something like that. So for instance, I can say, all right, well, let's say I want to log a credit card transaction. I can say, okay, well, it's a Visa transaction. Let's choose this Visa. Let's say it's toward a particular vendor. Let's see here. I'm going to choose actually. Okay, that's fine. Let me choose actually this USD entity. And now I'm going to add my expense line. So let's say, for this Visa transaction, let's say maybe let's expense this service, let's say $300. Click on add, and let's click on save. And before we do that, let's populate this payment amount, and let's click on save. And I'll show you what that transaction looks like. There we go. So it's going to debit your expense, credit your credit card account. So that's how you can cut a check straight from the system. And speaking of checks, the way to actually create a check in the system, there's several different modules that support checks. So there's the bill payment module, which we covered earlier. There's the outgoing payment module, the sales tax payment as well. So any payments coming out of the system, you can actually create a check for. Now, the way to create a check is simply changing the payment method. So for instance, let's start from scratch and let's actually create a check. So I'm going to choose check here, and let's say the check is coming from, sure, let's do Bank of America. All right, and let's add our expense lines. So choose a USD expense account here. Now, if you have a check number for this particular transaction that you want to attach to this check, you can enter that check number here. Otherwise, if you want to print it later by doing a check run, you can do that as well. So let's print it later in this case. Let's say we want to do a check run. Save this transaction. And what I want to do my check run, let's say later in the day, I can go to the print queue module. And that's going to log for me all the transactions where I've selected that print later function. Because again, you can cut a check with the bill payment module as well. Just simply select check as your payment method. So once you've selected the print later, saved your transaction, it's going to send it here to the print queue module. And here we're going to find all the print later checks that there have been. So here you can actually do a full check run. So you can select all the checks that you want to print off. So let's say I wanted to do this, and you can click on Print Batch. And now you can assign a starting check number. So number 1 is going to get this check number right here that I'm entering. And then number 2 is going to get basically 89527 and so on. So I can sort this as well. I can change it if I want a particular check to have a particular number. And I can simply hit confirm, and that'll print the check for me. So basically what that will do is print this check in PDF format, and here you can actually print it off. You can see here the 8 pages, so the 8 checks that I have. And this is the standard check template that we use. So you can let your account manager know if you want this tweaked. So if you need this changed in any way, like if you need a field moved or something else added, or if you need a format adjusted, just let your account manager know and they'll be sure to do that for you. And once this is printed off successfully, you'll want to mark all your checks off as printed. So the reason why we've separated this functionality is in case, your check printer was out of paper or it jammed or something like that. We don't want to be automatically marking transactions as printed when they weren't successfully printed. So once they are, simply just go here and mark them off as printed. And a couple modules that are related to the check transactions are the check center and the void check modules. So the check center simply collects all your transactions in the system where you've selected a payment method of check. So whether you've got print later or you put in a number, any transaction, in this case, see how here we can actually put in a check number for this bill payment. So any transaction where you've selected check, any outgoing checks, they're going to appear in this check center. The void check module, pretty straightforward. Any voided transactions that had payment method as check on them will get collected in this module here. All right, so great. Let's move on to the bank deposit module. Okay, so the bank deposit module, this module is going to be largely used for representing the bank deposits that you'll make to your bank. So for instance, if you collect a lot of checks and cash payments and you make a weekly deposit to your bank account, you can use this bank deposit module to represent that deposit, where basically in lump sum, you'll collect all your checks and cash transactions together and post it to the bank. So for instance, let's say I want to deposit to this HSBC account. What I can do is click on Add Payments, and it's going to pop up for me basically all the different undeposited funds transactions. So this is largely in the case where you're collecting temporarily all your transactions into a clearing account like undeposited funds, and then you want to move it out from undeposited funds to the bank when you actually post it. So for instance, let's say we want to and you can use the search module, the search field here to search for the different checks. So for example, let's say, I know that there were some checks on this date that I want to collect. So I can do these two, and you can see the running sum of these two on the top left. And click on Add. So this one's actually a sales tax payment, so and that's an invoice payment. So let's click on Add Payments here, and you can see how it adds them. So these are the two undeposited transactions that we're going to transfer to HSBC. So what I can do now is simply click Save to save my transaction, or let's say if there was a bank fee associated with this deposit, or let's say you're managing all your Stripe transactions through this way. A lot of cases, if you have a lot of transactions that come in from your payment gateway, you may want to consider collecting them in an undeposited funds account, and then those payouts that eventually go to your bank, you can represent them using this bank deposit module. There's a lot of payment gateways, they'll combine a whole bunch of transactions into one single payout, they'll tack a fee on it, and then post that to your bank. So in this case, let's pretend these were the two payments, and in this case, one of them's a refund. But essentially what you can do is combine these together, and then let's say, I had a fee that was associated with it, maybe a transaction fee or something like that. I can actually choose an expense account here. Whatever that fee amount is, put it in as negative amount, and then hit save. And the transaction for that, as you can see, is it's going to credit the undeposited fund for the deposit. Debit. Right here. It'll credit the undeposited fund for the payment, and then the refund it'll debit. And in this case, it's going to debit that bank account with that amount. And you can see here the fee gets expensed as well. So this is the module you're going to largely use to post to your bank, especially if you're dealing with a lot of undeposited funds or clearing accounts of that nature. So again, you want to have a discussion with your account manager to see how you want to set this up, whether you will be using undeposited funds accounts or not. So sometimes, especially where you may not have a lot of transactions, you may not have a high volume, so you may consider posting those transactions directly to your bank. But in this case, especially if you have a lot of transactions, you may want to consider using this method. And of course, the bank deposit, just like the outgoing payment, has its own center. You can go to the bank deposit center where the standard center features apply. All right, let's go to the transfer funds module. This is a very, very simple module where you can transfer funds from one bank account to the other. So for instance, if I want to transfer from Bank of America to Wells Fargo, I can just put in an amount. And there we go. Click save, and it'll transfer those funds. Very, very simple. It has its own center, of course. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about recurring entries. So you may have noticed that journal entries are some other modules, and to be specific, non-inventory bills, non-inventory invoices, and transfer funds as well also have the ability to create recurring transactions, just like journal entries do. So this can be quite powerful. Basically, what you can do is create a recurring transaction for this. So I'm going to call this, for example, let's say this particular entry here that we've got in the back, entry 376, we want to post this every month. So I'm going to say dummy recurring transaction. And I'm going to say, let's say we want it to recur monthly. And let's say the next recurring date was at the end of November. And let's say we want it to end maybe sometime next year. There we go. Now we hit save and click OK. So what will happen is at the end of the month, this entry will automatically get created in the system. And you can actually control all these recurring entries from the recurring transaction center. So I can actually choose a time too when they get posted. And I can see at the very bottom here, I've got my dummy recurring transaction. So I can actually view history here to see all the history of my transactions that were posted. So let's take a look at some of the completed recurring entries. So if I click on view history on this one, for example, I'm going to see all the different transactions that were created out of this recurring entry. So you can see here that it ran on pretty much every day for quite a few days, and it created an entry every day. And this is the message. So here's how you can manage, in case there was an error at some point, you can manually create it, and so on. And so you can delete the recurring entries as well. You can edit them as well. So if you want to change it from monthly to daily or something like that, you can always edit that as well. So this is really handy for things like payroll. You're going to have particular entries in the system. So you can create these for any monthly bills as well. So internet, electricity, things like that. That's most commonly where these recurring transactions get used. Okay. Another thing of note that I want to mention is projects and classes. So you can actually create projects and classes in the system. And for example, I've got an ecom class, an EDI class, a wholesale class, and so on. So just switching gears here from the recurring transactions, you can actually set up classes in your system. And typically what a lot of our clients will do is they'll set up classes for all their different sales channels. So as you can see here, there's an e-com class, a wholesale class, and so on. And when you create an order, you can associate that order to a particular sales channel. So we can configure it so that all your e-com orders that drop in automatically have an e-com class associated to them. All the wholesale orders that you key in, we can make it so that those orders get defaulted to wholesale, unless they're some other order type. And so then when those orders get processed and they get shipped out, then you can run reports to see, okay, how's my e-com versus my wholesale versus my retail and so on. So this is one way to create those buckets of order types in the system and assign all those orders to that particular type. So you can have a discussion with your account manager to see how you want to set those up. If you want to, take advantage of that feature, you can definitely set those up that way. All right, let's go ahead and let's talk about sales tax. So you can use the Prepare Tax Return module to actually file your income taxes. So for instance, I'm at the sales tax return module here. Now, I've got these set up as a Canadian GST return, so yours might look a little bit different than this. In fact, it's probably going to look simpler, especially if it's a U.S. tax return. You can change the form here as well. So in case you do file a GST return, but you need to do a PST return for our Canadian clients out there. So let's do a GST return today. And let's say I want to file a return from August 31 to, I'm going to choose some bad dates here and say August 7th here. Oh, sorry, September 7th. So just for the purposes of this example, we're just going to do August 31st to 9/7. So what this will do is in the system, it'll automatically capture all the sales taxes and all those transactions for you automatically. So it's going to put them in here, use this form, which is essentially a formula to calculate the taxes that you owe, in this case, to the federal government of Canada for GST. And a lot of these numbers you can actually drill down into. So if they're blue, you can actually click on them and then see further details about them. You can make adjustments as well to any of these lines. So if you needed to make any adjustments, just click on the pencil, select your adjustment account, put in your amount here, and then adjust. All the adjustments will go to the Adjustment Center, Tax Adjustment Center, I should say. And here you can actually review the adjustments, delete them in case they were created accidentally, and so on. So once you've got your adjustments created, your return looks good, you've reviewed everything, you want to click on File Sales Tax. And you want to make sure things are ready to go, because clicking OK will basically finalize that tax return. So what I'll do is once I click OK, notice how you can only file from September 8th and onwards, because we just filed up to September 7th. And so if I go to Tax File Center, we're going to see our filed return. Here we go. So you can see it's filed from 8/31 to 9/07. And I'm going to double click this. I can see the transactions just to see what this transaction looks like, this filed return. And there's several different options here that if I right click on this return, there's a whole bunch of things I can do. So I can view exceptions. So it'll pull up an exception report if there were any exceptions in this filed return. The view filing detail will pull up all the different individual tax lines and show them for you. Then there's filing summary, which is basically what we saw. And so here you can actually print this out into PDF format and send this to your tax agency. And you can view any existing payments or refunds in this case we don't have any yet. But what I can do is if I want to record a payment toward this filed tax return. Now, if the amount due was negative, that would mean that I would get a refund from the government. So I can actually record a refund as well. In this case, it's not going to let me. If I were to try and go through with it, it wouldn't let me because the amount due is a positive balance here. So instead, I'll have to do a payment. So what I can do here is select my payment method, select my payment account. Actually choose cash here, that's fine. And let's choose Canadian bank account, and let's say we make $100 worth of payment. There's discounts too if you're eligible for those that you can select. Click on save, close this. And notice how the total amount due has gone down now. The status has gone to partially paid. And if I pull up any payments or refunds, it's actually going to have that payment here for me. And of course, you can undo it as well by voiding it, and then go on with your filed return. So this is largely how you can file tax returns within the system, and how you can put payments towards those returns. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the audit trail module. So basically, any transaction with the system, any financial transaction, will always be recorded in the audit trail module. So this is a handy module that that can be used to track all your deleted transactions. If you want to track any changes on a particular transaction. And of note is that the sales orders and purchase orders don't have financial transactions associated to them, so they won't be recorded here. But any transaction that was ever recorded in the system will appear here, including voided ones. So you can see here, for example, the sales tax payment that we just made. You can see in detail who it was created by, the date, if there are any modifications. So, for example, I don't know if I actually have one here, but if there are any changes made to any of these transactions, you can see here this bill. And actually, for example, I know that we did do a bill payment, but then we voided it, I believe. Or I think it was an invoice payment, actually. Right, so you can see, if you recall earlier in the training, we created an invoice payment, but then we voided it. So you can see here that it was actually deleted. You can see who was deleted by, what date it was deleted, and so on. And so any changes to a transaction, even if they add shipping or adjust the date, that'll get recorded in this audit trail. So this is great for going back and seeing a detailed history of what was done and by whom. Another module that's related to this is the deleted transactions module. So this pulls up all the voided transactions in the system. And so this is another way that you can kind of view only voided transactions. And the nice thing here is you can search by a variety of different things. So in here, the audit trail, you're limited to the 3 fields that you can search through. But here you can search through entity, date, and so right away you can know that, okay, well, if there was a payment to this vendor, but it was voided, you can actually search by that vendor and find that transaction right away. Okay, let's talk about the fiscal year end module. So this is the module that you're going to use to close your fiscal year in the system. So for instance, let's say we want to close out 2019. What we can do is we can say, okay, or actually let's do 2018, and let's say, okay, I want to close out the books on 2018, and I want to post to this retained earnings account. Here's my reference number. Here's my memo if I needed it, and I can click on Calculate Closing Transactions. So it's going to preview those transactions for the journal entry at the bottom part here. And once you review it and click on Close Period, basically it's going to close this this fiscal year, and it's going to post this entry automatically, this journal entry. So then your year would be your fiscal year would be closed, in this case 2018. And now whether you can post to that year or not depends on your settings. So you can review those settings with your account manager to see if you still want to allow users to post and close periods. But by default, I believe it will be set to no, so you won't be able to. So this is the module that you'll use to do your fiscal year end. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about refunds and how to record refunds in the system. So I'm going to go to the Customer Deposit Center and show you how you can record a refund. So let's say this was a customer deposit that was recorded on the sales side of things, and you wanted to refund a deposit in full. So I can right click on this deposit, click on refund balance. Now, if it is a Stripe transaction, it'll actually give you an option here of processing the refund through Stripe. So you can actually tick off this process card option, and it'll perform that refund not only within Zoro, but within Stripe as well, or Moneris, or whatever your payment gateway is that you're connected to. In this case, this transaction is not, the deposit hasn't been created with the payment gateway, so it's not giving me that option. So what I can do is I can select my refund method. I can make a partial refund as well, but in this case, let's just do it in full. Basically, select my information here, put in my memo, and then click on refund deposit. Click OK. Notice how the deposit has changed its status now from open to refunded. So I can actually right click here and I can show refunds. And what that will do is that will take me to the Customer Refund Center, where I will find all the refunds, the customer sales refunds. So on the sales side of things, you can do a refund on a customer deposit or a customer credit. So a customer credit, if we go to the Credit Center, has the exact same option of refunding. So you can simply right-click on a credit, on refund balance, and it's going to give me the exact same options for creating a refund. So it's important to note that you can create a refund on those two options, credits and deposits. On the purchasing side of things, similarly, you can create a vendor refund on vendor prepayments and vendor credits. So let's create a refund for a vendor prepayment. So this is in the scenario where you've recorded a prepayment, but for whatever reason, you want like a refund. So you've requested a refund, and you can process that on the prepayment. So you can right-click prepayment, click on refund balance, and just basically enter your information in here. Let's do a partial refund this time. Just choose the different methods here. Enter in the information, click on record refund. And there we go. The status here now on this prepayment has changed to partially refunded. So now we can go to the Vendor Refund Center to see that refund that we just created. Here it is. And again, you can perform a refund, a vendor refund on a vendor credit as well, and just like we showed, a vendor prepayment. Okay, and finally, to conclude the training, let's go through some reports. So I'm going to click on Reports. And again, these are out-of-the-box reports that are available to you and your instance. So if you need additional reporting, you can let your account manager know. These out-of-the-box reports are in addition to the reporting that you can build from the centers. And so these basically come standard with your instance. Let's go through some of the ones that are related to accounting. So let's talk a little bit about, you've got your balance sheet. Let's pull up the balance sheet actually. So the balance sheet, quite simply, pretty straightforward. And here the normal reporting features apply, where you can print the report out, you can export it to PDF and Excel and so on. And you have your filtering on the right here for your dates. So here's your standard balance sheet. You've got your balance sheet summary, which summarizes some of the accounts for you. So it's like a quick balance sheet, basically. All right. On the sales and purchasing side, you've got your AR aging, right? So you've got an AR aging, which splits it by currency, and a lot of these you can actually drill down into. On the purchasing side, you have the AP aging. Again, you can click on these to drill down. And you've also got a trial balance as well. So let's go to the accounting and let's pull up the trial balance. There we go. this case, let's do an adjusted one. And this will have your trial balance with all your debits and credits. Transaction journal, which will just show you basically transaction by transaction. So for example, all the transactions that we've created so far in the training, they'll get posted here. The newest ones will always appear on the first page. And of course, you've got your balance sheet. So basically your P&L, or sorry, your income statement and your P&L. So your income statement, it'll break it down by default by month, but of course you can change that here as well if you want to group it by something else. So let's say you want to group it by quarter, it'll pull it into quarters here. So those are the standard reports that are available to you in addition to the other ones that you can build. That covers all the modules for the accounting training. So see you in the next training and all the best.